The film opens in the near future with the President of the United States addressing the nation. The president stumbles over his words as he announces that the Western forces consist of the states of Texas and California, which oppose the legitimate government. He says that the armed forces of the USA suffered a crushing blow from the president on behalf of his electorate. He promises to reintegrate the residents of the president's speech is being listened to in a hotel by war photographer Lee Miller. She realizes that the president doesn't believe his own words. She takes a photo of the screen as another explosion thunders outside the window the next day. The woman heads to the unrest-filled streets. She dons a bright press vest and captures everything she sees: the people's outrage, the crowd beatings, and police brutality. Here, Lee notices a young girl with a camera getting badly hit by a policeman. She pulls her aside and the girl recognizes Lee as her idol. Seeing her as an idol, Lee hands her the press vest. Suddenly an explosion rocks the crowd, killing many people. Lee immediately grabs her camera and takes some truly horrifying shots. The girl joins her in capturing the scene. Later, Lee meets with her colleague reporter Joel and veteran journalist Sam Lee. They discuss the situation and conclude that the Western forces will soon reach Washington. They plan to make their major report to photograph and interview the deposed ruler in besieged Washington before the Western forces soldiers arrive. They must travel more than 1,000 kilometers and try not to die from the bullets of the radical citizens of the former United States. Sammy is categorically against this plan as journalists are being killed in Washington. However, he skillfully charts a path through the Civil War-torn territory, showing that he too has considered such a trip. Lee heads to her room but is called by the girl she saved earlier. Jessie admits she also wants to photograph the war and admires Lee's work, but Lee bids her farewell and leaves. In the morning, she exits the hotel and sees Sammy and Jessie in the car shared with Joel. She is furious, but her partner explains that the girl dreams of becoming like her, so why not help Lee reconcile and get into the car? The team sets off soon and reaches a massive car crash. The vehicles are shot up, smashed, and abandoned right on the road. It's only possible to guess what happened to their passengers, but Joel skillfully navigates through the horrific traffic jam on the road. Sammy imitates an interview with the president, asking Joel questions. Does the politician think it was a good idea to disband the FBI and ask for comments on the use of airstrikes against American citizens? Joel laughs, noting the sharpness of the questions, and concludes that they need to let the president finish speaking before he chokes on the rope. Wasn't it a great idea to disband the FBI and ask for comments on the use of airstrikes against American citizens? Soon the group arrived at a gas station where they were met by armed workers while Joel refueled the car. Jessie and Lee stepped aside and saw a couple of mutilated people hanging by their hands. Nearby, one of the gas station workers explains that these are looters. He asked Jessie to decide their fate and kill them immediately or let them suffer. The girl is paralyzed with shock, but Lee suddenly asked the worker to stand closer to the victims for a group photo. Driving away from the gas station, the shaken Jessie realizes she didn't take a single photo or object to the killings. Lee calmly reminds her that they don't ask questions. They ask questions and record what's happening so others can ask questions later if she wants to be a journalist. She must pull herself together, though, because the group continues through destroyed cities filled with the bodies of the dead in one of the squares. Lee asked to stop, which led Jessica to the wrecked helicopter, and he ordered her to photograph it. The girl complies and talks about her former father, who sits in his house pretending everything is fine. Jessica uses his film camera. Because a good digital one is hard to come by now, the girl apologizes for imposing herself, but Lee cuts her off. She doesn't care what the girl thinks or feels. She will just shoot Jessica, then asks if Lee will photograph her execution later. Lee confides in Sammy that she always wanted her photos to be a warning, but they have turned into mere albums. The old man reminds her of what she was like when she was young and asks her to be more attentive to the girl. She should be more attentive to the girl, who knows well what young reporters have to go through. Joel sums up that Lee has stopped believing in the power of journalism. Suddenly gunfire erupts in the distance and the group decides to stop for the night. Joel talks with Jessie and advises her to stay here where it's relatively safer. But the girl is stubborn and doesn't intend to hide from danger. The next morning, the team arrives in a town. In the midst of a firefight, the groups join together to capture the horror of the events unfolding. Jesse, forgetting everything, takes shot after shot while a soldier tries to save his wounded comrade by bandaging him. Then the journalists follow a group of soldiers clearing a building. They capture every movement of the armed men filming the execution of a wounded enemy. The faces of laughing soldiers indifferent to the surrounding chaos. Sammy calmly watches as the prisoners are executed while Jesse films it on camera. Lee turns away from the scene, but later they move on and soon arrive at a refugee camp where they can get food. The people have set up camp on a former stadium and the kids are happily playing with the sports. Lee is so grateful to have food brought to her by the lovely equipment Lee. She's surprised to see that she's developing film on the road. The girl admits that she knows how Lee's journey as a journalist began. After all, her photos of the student massacre became known worldwide. The journalist tells her that her parents also sit on a farm, preferring not to react to the Civil War. Jessie shows Lee how she views the photos using her phone. Lee admits that out of 30 photos she only got one good one. Usually she gets only one good one. Then she acknowledges Jessie's photo of a dying soldier as excellent. They rest by the fires at night and in the morning they continue through the ruined, smoldering country. Soon they enter a town untouched by the war. The people don't seem to understand where they are. They create the impression that they are traveling through time. The group enters a clothing store where the saleswoman offers them. They were so excited to try on anything they liked. They simply agreed to ignore the war because it wasn't their concern. Jessie asked Lee to try on a dress and photographs her. They relax, pretending that a peaceful life has returned. However, upon exiting, Sammy points out the armed men on the roof. He reminds them of the fates of Gaddafi, Mussolini, and Siasu. None of them could say anything in the end. So, Joel's hopes for a chance to interview the president are sadly not going to be fulfilled. Instead, they see ahead an amusement park with a dead soldier lying in the middle of the road as the car slowly moves by. A shot rings out, and the journalists take cover behind a building where two soldiers are already hiding. It turns out there's a sniper ahead shooting anyone who drives by. The soldiers are very casual about it, saying they don't know. Whoever the shooter is, they'll kill him. It's as simple as that. Because he fired first while the soldiers were dealing with the problem. Lee simply lies on the grass admiring the flowers. Finally, the sniper clears the way. The journalists continue, but on a forest road. Lee notices a car following them. She decides to slow down and let it pass, but when it catches up, it turns out to be their colleagues, reporters from Hong Kong. One of them moves to Lee's car while driving. Then, Jessie decides to mimic his action and goes to the Chinese journalist's car. The pair pull ahead of Lee's car after discussing their affairs. The journalist suddenly notices that the colleague's car has disappeared from the road. Lee starts to worry. Soon they reach a farm and see the Chinese journalist's empty car ahead. The girl and the journalist are held at gunpoint by some guys in camouflage. Lee manages to break free and they haven't been noticed yet. They observe the soldiers loading numerous civilian bodies into a pit. They realize these are criminals as there is no regular army in the area. Lee kindly asks Sammy to stay while they approach the soldiers. Joel explains they are journalists just passing by. But the guy in camouflage suddenly shoots one of the Chinese journalists and then starts questioning them. He realizes that they are from the Central States of America. In a shocking turn of events, the American calmly kills the second Chinese journalist. It becomes clear that he intends to kill them all. In a heart-stopping moment, Sam's car rushes onto the road, hitting the bandit. Jessie flies straight into the mass grave, and the girl comes to her senses at the top of the pile of bodies. She crawls out and Joel manages to grab her. They jump into the car as Sammy floors it. The awakened soldiers shoot at them, but the car drives away. Jessie and Joel are understandably upset after experiencing such a traumatic event. After a bit of time to calm down, they discover that Sammy is injured. They move the old man to the back seat and continue onward as night falls. They drive through a burning forest, and the people are mesmerized by the flaming trees on either side of the road. In the morning, they reach a military camp of the Western forces. They realize that Sammy has quietly died. They meet with their colleagues and learn that the government troops have practically surrendered. Their dream is unlikely to come true. The capital is defended by the last remnants of stubborn soldiers and the remnants of the secret services. So Lee and Joel are late. There will be no story. Sammy died in vain. Later, Lee refutes Joel's statement. Sammy always wanted to die. He didn't want to die from some disease. This isn't the worst outcome. The Western forces head to Washington. Lee is cleaning Sammy's blood from the car and they follow at night. The journalists reach the White House and film everything that's going on. A real battle erupts on the city streets, and Lee and Jesse capture the soldiers' faces. They capture the courage and the death of the soldiers. They follow a group that clears roadblocks and breaks through to the president's residence. The Western forces reach the White House and surround it. One of Joel's colleagues tell him that the victors are landing on the Congress building from helicopters, so it will all end soon. The president is definitely in the White House and will be killed for sure. Suddenly, the president's motorcade departs from the building chased by soldiers. They stop and shoot the official cars, and then Lee suddenly says that the president is not there and leads her group to the White House. It's so sad. These poor soldiers are following the journalists into the bodies of the dead. Everything around is broken and scattered, but no living people are visible. The soldiers ask not to get underfoot and the journalists follow them into the White House. They start searching it more thoroughly. Soon they reach the press conference room where a female negotiator meets them. She asks for guarantees of the president's life, after which she promises to escort them to him. But the soldiers simply shoot her and move on. A battle with the president's guard breaks out in the building's corridors. Lee is horrified by what is happening and taking almost no photos, unlike Jesse, who gradually loses sensitivity chasing every new shootout. At one point, the girl loses her vigilance, runs into the middle of the corridor. Lee sees a soldier across the way. He raises his weapon and rushes forward, knocks Jesse down and covers her with his body lying on the floor. Jesse films the last moments of her mentor's life as she falls nearby after being shot in the back. Even after this, the girl gets up and follows Joel, who runs towards the Oval Office where the soldiers finally capture the president. He stops the execution and tries to ask the politician who ruined his country a question, but the president only asks to be spared, but the soldiers shoot him. Jesse captures the last moments of the US president's life on camera, then shows the world what happened. The smiling Western soldiers stand against the backdrop of the politician's body, a terrifying picture. It's an action movie full of blood. A political film warning how quickly the world can go mad. The director brought the horrors occurring in different countries to the streets of America.